I'm Dan, and I've been reminded that Lonely Loser's Day is rapidly approaching. You might know it as Valentine's Day, the day that you give your girlfriend roses that will probably last, 3, 4 days, maybe a week tops? I'm going to teach you how to make leather roses that I can pretty much guarantee will last longer than the relationship you're currently in. A few years ago, I wanted to make some, but I went all over YouTube, and there were plenty of tutorials on how to make roses. But let's face it, your guys' roses all sucked ass, so I was forced to do my own thing. I found a decent template on a Martha Stewart website. She was making these paper roses, so I just took that and then I transferred it over to leather, and I'm going to teach you how to make them. All you're going to need is a few basic items. A box of cereal, don't need the cereal, just the box. Of course, some leather, some barbed wire, contact cement, rubber cement, same thing. Various dyes, I'm going to be using red, green, and black. Some sort of scribing tool, anything with a point on it will do. It doesn't have to be a scribing tool. A ballpoint pen will definitely work. A pair of scissors. I use copper wire, but when I first started I was using dental floss, which worked very well, so you can definitely use that. And a little bit of water. First thing you're going to do is you're going to take your box of cereal and you're going to take your template and you're going to put it on there. So this is the template that I used. To make this shape, all I did was draw a heart, and then after I had that, I just made a little point on there. You want a nice little tail on there. Those tails come in really handy for the building. There's the leaf. That's what I'd ideally want it to look like, but you know what? I never end up cutting them looking like that, so really I just kind of just make a smooth edge and then cut little notches in there. This would be the inner petal, easy enough to draw. For this thing, all I did was take the top of a Tabasco bottle, traced around it, and then made points to connect it all together. Pretty simple stuff. You're just going to take that, you're going to put it on your cereal box, trace them out, and then cut those pieces out so you can use them as your template. You're going to cut out one of each of your shapes off of your template, and then you're going to transfer those onto the leather. You're going to be doing 2 of these. These are the leaves. These are the main petals. You're going to be doing 15 of those. These are the inside petals. You're going to be doing 6 of these. And this thing, I don't even know what it's called, but you're only going to need 1. For the petals, you want to do rough cuts. You don't want to cut right along the line yet, unless of course you're just planning on doing it one color. I like doing the edge a separate color than the main body, but that's up to you. If you're going to do it just one solid color, go ahead, cut along the lines, but I'll be doing that later. Same thing with the inner petals. Just a rough cut. As far as the things that will be one solid color, the green leaves and the, I don't even know what this thing's called, but those will just be solid green. So I cut those to shape. So for the 15 larger petals, you just want to paint the dye on. But on 5 of them, you want to make sure you do front and back, because these ones will be showing. On the 6 littler petals, you want to do both sides, front and back, because of course those will be showing. On the leaves, I like to take a razor blade and cut some little shapes in there, maybe rough up the edges. Yeah, that's not my strong skill right there. They kind of look like crap, but they look okay in the end. But these, I find them just much easier to just dip into the dye, because all these little nooks and crannies are kind of hard to get. And this thingy, you want to dye both sides as well. Okay, now that you have all your pieces cut out, it should look something like this. Now I like to do mine in 2 colors, so I take a Q-tip, put just a little bit of the dye on, and I run it along the edge. I personally think that black and red go excellent together, so I just do a little bit along the edges. And they turn out something like that. These are the ones that aren't stained on the back. These are the ones that are stained on both sides. Just run your Q-tip along the edge, trying not to stain what is red with black, because of course it will cover it. And you can use any colors you want. I'm just a fan of red and black. And you're going to go along and you're going to do this to all 15 of your big petals and all 6 of your little petals. Now that you have all your pieces cut out and dyed, it's time to move on to the barbed wire. Now barbed wire was kind of a tricky thing. I went around looking for it, but all I could find was like several 100-foot rolls, and that's not what I need. But if I've learned anything from video games, it's that if you need mats for a project, you can go out and find them in the world. Turns out there's these chain link shrubberies that have vines of barbed wire growing above them, and with just some bolt cutters, snip, snip, it's yours for free. I'd recommend you do it. As long as you don't get caught, it's totally free. So, you want to take your barbed wire, cut a piece off, however long you want. I'm doing a long stem rose. Spray paint it green, let it dry. I personally cook it in the oven for a while just to speed up the process. You take your smaller petals, the 6 of them, and you soak them in water for a few minutes, let them get good and soft, and then you start kneading them. Try to break them down a little bit, get them nice and pliable. I just kind of fold them and roll them back and forth till they're good and soft and pliable so you can work with them. You take your piece of copper wire or dental floss, or some really strong thread would even work. Fishing line would probably work as well. I haven't tried it, but I'm assuming it would. And you attach that on the end just so it's started. It's on there. It's holding strong. And you take your rubber cement. Oh, good stuff. And you take a good hit of that because it helps you forget how lonely you are on this crappy ass holiday. Anything helps. I don't drink, so a little bit of rubber cement does about it good. And you just want to paint that on the bottom half of each of your petals. So just the bottom half. And you want to do it all of them because this stuff gets stickier as time goes on. So you want it good and tacky by the time you get to it. If you do them one at a time, it's just wet. It's not tacky at all. Makes it a lot harder to deal with. But you're just painting the bottom halves of them on the front side of them. You'll be getting some on the back side too, but that's kind of a transfer. What's on the front of one will end up on the back of another. So you get that all painted on all 6 of them. One more. One more. Yeah, there we go. Starting to feel the buzz. Okay. So you take your first one. Just kind of stick it on there. You want it, I don't know, about an inch down from the top of it. And you wrap your piece of wire around it once or twice just to hold it in place. You're going to grab your second one. You're going to slightly overlap these a little bit. And use your wire to hold it in place. 1 or 2 wraps should do. Once you get to the point where you have a couple of them going on, you want to... So you're overlapping each one about halfway over the one before, and you're kind of rolling them like I guess like a taco maybe, or a burrito. And you're just overlapping the one before, and you're just pretty much going around in a circle. Once you have it in place, you take your wire, you wrap it around. It's not supposed to look pretty right now, it's just holding it in place. At this point, you want to just keep throwing on more rubber cement on the back sides of the new ones you put on. Just on the back side a little bit. Doesn't matter, this won't be showing at all. Put your next one on. Overlap it about 50% or so. Wrap it on with your wire. Little more rubber cement. Starting to smell great in here, let me tell you. And fortunately, any excess rubber cement that you have that is visible will peel right off. And you put your last one on. Overlapping it somewhere near 50%. Wrap your wire around once or twice. Boom, and you'll have a monstrosity that looks something like this. Now temporarily, while it's drying, you're going to take your wire and you're going to wrap it around up high just to get it to hold the shape that you have. Which I know it looks nothing like a rose, but eventually it will. So this is kind of what you got going on now. Everything's just overlapping. You're going around in a circle, kind of doing the golden ratio, but with leather. Okay, so you're going to let this dry for a couple of minutes and then you're going to start folding it. So now that the glue's dried a bit, you're just going to take these guys and you're just going to roll the tips over a little bit. Kind of get them so they're not so stiff looking. Just fold them around and you're going to end up with something like this. And you're just going to wait until your glue dries and then we're going to start with the bigger petals. Okay, now that your glue is good and dry, you're going to soak your big petals for a few minutes, let them get all moist. Then you're going to knead them, roll them around, get them all soft, pliable, and you're going to continue the same thing over. You're going to take liberal amounts of rubber cement, and you're going to be doing up the front side of it. Tripping all over the place. And you're just going to continue the golden ratio around. This row goes up just a little bit higher than your initial one. So if you can see it's sticking up just a little bit higher. Stick it on, get it in place, wrap the wire around it again. Of course, it's not going to be exactly where you want it, but that's just because the glue hasn't dried yet. Do one. Then on the back side of it, you want to put some more rubber cement on, about 50% of it or so, so that the next one has something to adhere to. I only do about 3 or 4 of the big petals at a time, and then I let it dry for a bit, and then I do 3 or 4, let that dry, and then, of course, 3 or 4, depending on. Wrap your wire around. I'm going to put a little more on the back side. And maybe a little more for me. Chemicals. Gotta love them. Okay, so one more. And at this point, it is definitely going to look like crap. But in the end, it becomes a thing of beauty. So right now, it's that monstrosity. It doesn't look anything like a rose, but I assure you that it will. Okay, so then I'm going to wrap the wire around the upper part of it, get it good and tight, and just let that glue dry for a while, and then we're going to start with the next ones. Okay, so now that those are dry, you unwrap your wire as far as you can. You even want to pull it out from the ones you've wrapped before. Pull it down between the little tails on your petals, because you do not want a big ball of wire inside this thing at the end. And then again, you're just going to apply a liberal amount of rubber cement all over the bottom part of this thing. Let it just soak in. While that's drying, or at least getting tacky, you're going to take your next 3 petals and you're going to coat those. About the bottom half or so of them. And by the time you're done with the third one, the first one should be tacky enough to start sticking. Of course, it'll slide around a bit, but that's quite all right. You actually want it to, so you can adjust it to start, because now you want to start making it look like a rose. So you're doing about the bottom half or so. So by now that first one should be tacky enough to stick. And you just figure out where you left off, because you're just going around in a nice circle and you're overlapping everything 50%. And at this point, you don't have to keep wrapping every single one with wire, because they will kind of just stay in place, a little bit more. So get one on, put a little more rubber cement just on the edge of it where the other one will be overlapping. Oops. It's number 2. Put a little more rubber cement on this guy. Just on the trailing edge where the other one will be overlapping. Put your third one on. And then again, wrap it with the wire to hold everything in place. And you're going to let it dry. So again, you just do the same steps as you did before. And it starts to come together and it's starting to look like a rose. We have one more layer to put on. Those are the ones that we dyed both front and back, and that'll pretty much complete the project. There'll be little odds and ends that we need to do to make it look good, but as you can see, we are well on our way. I'll see you in another 10 minutes when this glue dries. Okay, on to the final step of the petals. This one is the most important because it's the outside. Everybody's going to see what's going on. So of course you soak these ones in water. Put your contact cement on, let it dry really well so it's super tacky. You don't want to have to keep rearranging this one, but you want to take your time with it. So you pick up where you left off and do your overlapping. Still just following the golden ratio, getting a good spiral coming out from the center. Take your time with it. On these ones, you don't want to use too much contact cement on the back side of them to get them to stick, because that will be pretty obvious in the end. We're going to take steps to cover that up though. We still have a couple more things to do. The green thingies to put on. Just take your time. You know what a rose looks like. Make it look like a rose. Only put the contact cement exactly where you need it on this outside. You know, at the same time, if you get a little bit of spillage, it does peel off when it dries, but not completely. It does leave a residue. Oh, that's looking good. Okay, final petal. And we're going to let it sit and dry for a while. And then we're going to put the leaves on. Oh, that is looking very rose-like. You want to try to get this last one to overlap the first one. Just makes it look a little more complete. And when you've got it where you like it, once again, wrap your wire around. Get it on there nice and tight. Squish all that contact cement together. You want this thing to be one solid piece when you're done. Can't have petals breaking off, you know. It's pretty cheesy. And rather rose-like, is it not? We're not quite done yet, but very close to being done. be back when this dries and we'll put on the finishing touches. So I ended up leaving it overnight, letting it dry. You want this as dry as possible before you end up cutting off all the little tails on your pedals. So you unwrap the bad boy, and at this point you won't need any of the string or wire or whatever it is you used. So you can go ahead and just snip that off. So your tails come down a little far, which is, great for building it. It gives it stability or whatnot, but, in the end, you don't want them. So I'm going to cut them, right about at its narrowest point, somewhere right about there. And then those leaves and whatnot are going to be put on. So right now I'm soaking this piece because this will be the next thing that goes on. But we're just going to take, a nice sharp razor blade and cut around this. I guess I'll just show you the finished product on that because it takes a minute or two to cut through. So now we're going to take this green piece and we're going to cut it so it's open like that. We're essentially cutting the letter T into it so that we can slide it up and over the barbed wire. I roll the edges back, just about halfway or so. Roll them all back because those won't actually be attached. And then back to liberal amounts of rubber cement. First you hit up the rows, you got this nice flat spot that you cut on there. And I like to put way too much on so that it flows down into any of the recesses that are still left in there to help make it a little more solid. And then do around the base of it. So let that sit for a moment and get tacky. This, you're going to cover everything that pretty much isn't curled over. So just paint it on. Okay, looking good. So now in the slit that you've created, you're just going to slide that up and over the barbed wire so that you have that little shape going on, and then just kind of mash it down around the edges. Now this you'll have to hold for a while to get it to stay. I don't like doing the wire or the dental floss on that because it leaves creases inside the leather, and I want this to be smooth and pretty. So I'm going to sit here and hold it in place with my hands. I'll get back to you in a minute when that's done. Okay, now it's time for the finishing touches. We're going to be putting on the leaves now. Of course, like every other piece, we soaked it in water, rolled it around, got it nice and pliable. The goal with the leaves is you need to cover up the slit that you cut in the last green thing, and you're just trying to cover that up to make it look like one solid piece. So, like with any of the others, of course, your friend and mine, rubber cement. Don't need a whole lot for this. You don't want it squishing out around the edges. And you're just doing your best to cover up that slit that you made. Like with the other green thing, I'm just going to hold these on with my fingers until they dry, which doesn't take very long. And then I'll show you the final product in the end. And if everything goes well, you should have a finished product something like this.
So even if your rose doesn't turn out like this, don't fret, you can always make another. When I first made these a few years back, I ended up making 23 of them for the ladies at work. Not in some romantic gesture or anything, just that, even though I hate this holiday, I've always secretly wanted to be appreciated on it. And even if I can't have that, I thought I could bring it to others. And they were quite a success. Everybody seemed to really enjoy them. They still have them around, some of them display them at work. So, it's nice to make somebody's day. Good luck on yours.